Israel is now planning the invasion of Gaza. The troops are at the border. How do you see these developments unfolding?
Good evening. Thank you very much for having you back on your show. It's an honor to be here. The plans ahead are, first of all, for Israel, for once and for all, create a solution for the war that we have been having for many years now between us and the terrorist group Hamas. This round of conflict is different from the other rounds because this time we need to decide for our current and future situation, are we able to keep living in the country that we live, in the area that we live? Now, as everybody has learned since Saturday, the 7th of October, Hamas is ISIS. Now, in the past, the US forces and many of its allies took upon themselves the mission to destroy ISIS. In the midst of those battles and of that mission, they destroyed many cities, including Mosul and Raqqa. Now that ISIS is defeated, we can all agree that that was a positive. The negative being that without doubt, many civilians died and many of their lives destroyed. Nobody put a stopwatch on the US forces and their allies while they were annihilating ISIS. For some reason, there's always a stopwatch on Israel. This is not something that is going to finish soon. Israel is going to make sure that for once and for all, the Hamas terrorist organization is wiped out and they are no longer capable of controlling the Gaza Strip, controlling the Palestinian population, which they are hurting at the same time. And of course, we will defend our own citizens who have been bombarded for years and just last week slaughtered in their beds. Don't put a stopwatch on Israel. Hamas is ISIS, and we will do the same.
Okay, Mr. Landau, once Israeli forces do enter Gaza, what do you think then the strategy will be? Because like you said, that the plan is to, of course, take out Hamas. But are we looking at then the possibility of a surgical strike-like operation against Hamas? Or do we see now in the future perhaps a complete takeover of Gaza by Israel?
So the current situation is that we have put the terrorist organization under siege. We have called for all of the civilians, all of the non-combatant residents of the Gaza Strip to head south as close as possible to their border with Egypt and to leave the north and center part of the Gaza Strip empty of anybody who is not identifying as a Hamas terrorist, to allow us to go ahead with this important mission by reducing as much as possible any civil collateral damage. We have not yet entered into the Gaza Strip, and I think we are the only military worldwide that is patiently waiting for the civilians to leave the area that we have warned them is about to become a war zone. Now, we are doing so while at the same time, the Hamas terrorists are blocking the civilians from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to head south. More than that, in the south, there is running water. The UN have opened some sort of a camp where there is fuel, food, and water. And just this afternoon, the UN itself, not Israel, the UN came out with a news bulletin saying that Hamas militant came into the UN camp and stole 24,000 gallons of petrol in order to bring it up north for their use. And this is something that the world needs to know. Israel is doing everything that it can in order to not harm civilians, while Hamas is doing everything they can to harm civilians, their own and ours. Now, talking about strategy, Israel has no interest in conquering the Gaza Strip again. We were there up until 2005, and we pulled out. We pulled out without any agreements, and the void that was filled was the Hamas, and we could not stand that any longer.
Okay, Mr. Landau, It of course makes it much more difficult for the Israeli forces, given that news is coming in of how Hamas terrorists are blockading routes for civilians to exit the northern areas and also taking over certain civilian buildings and keeping the Palestinian population hostage and using them as human shields.
Correct. This is a method that they have been using for decades. Already back in 2002, during the Second Intifada, the IDF went into major cities in Judea and Samaria, Nablus and Hebron, and we saw all the time that the Hamas terrorists are walking around with civilians. They shoot rockets from families' kitchens. They store rockets in the basement of hospitals. They use schoolrooms. They use anything possible that can make the life difficult for the Israeli military to attack. Of course it's difficult, and that's why we are calling for everybody who lives in the southern part of Gaza to make their way in the northern part of Gaza to make their way south. And we also call upon Egypt to open the border and we can possibly make a safe city on the Egyptian side, which can be funded by our allies in the region, with the US, with India, to help all of these people out of Gaza for safekeeping, in order for us to take out this organization, the same way that ISIS was taken out a couple of years ago. We need to look at Hamas the same as we looked at ISIS. It needs to be wiped out.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Frederic Landau, for joining us on NewsX to give us that very real perspective coming in directly from Israel on what the current situation is on the ground.